All right, Dono, why should Miami fans like the Big 12?
Okay. The first part of this is not necessarily Big 12 specific. Okay. But I think two of the more important things that I look at in a potential conference realignment scenario, the most important thing in my eyes is, are you getting a bigger revenue share? Because that's one of the chief complaints with the ACC. And from everything I know about the ACC grant of rights versus the Big 12, if I'm not mistaken, Big 12 member schools, and obviously if more teams join the conference, this could change. Maybe the deal could be renegotiated, but Big 12 schools right now earn more annually, about $8 million more annually per member than the ACC does. The ACC
then Florida State, Miami, and Clemson. Yeah.
So ACC members currently make an approximated $23.3 million annually. In the Big 12, it's currently 31.7. So not as high as the SEC and the Big 10, but it's still significantly higher than the ACC. So you have to start there, because Drake, when these talks about Florida State and Clemson and Miami, allegedly being unhappy in the ACC, before we ever had these conversations about Florida State getting left out of the CFP, because that just happened a couple weeks ago. The conversations were, why aren't these schools making more money? And why did you get locked into this terrible grant of rights that, you've been lapped by every other major conference outside of the Pac-12, obviously, but you've been lapped by everybody else. So I start there. Can you earn more TV revenue at a different spot? That's the first place I start. And then, of course, the second place you have to go to, some might even put this first, does this other conference give you a better chance of getting into the college football playoff? Now, obviously, even despite what just happened to Florida State, that is debatable, because I know Texas got in and they didn't, but then you'd say, well, if Jordan Travis hadn't been injured, Florida State would have gotten in too, and yada, yada, yada. But if a bunch of teams leave the ACC, that would no longer be a factor, because the ACC would get even weaker. So the first two things that I look at: higher share of revenue, better opportunity to get into the college football playoff. If the Big 12, in your scenario of the ACC imploding, that gives you a better chance to accomplish both of those things, I would be on board with that. And I think most people would. So I start there. Outside of other attractive reasons to join the Big 12, I got to put some lipstick on the pig here. Okay. Again, because obviously it's not the SEC and it's not the Big 10. There would be some interesting scenarios. I know that obviously Miami fans do not consider UCF to be a rival, but at least there would be an in-state tie-in. You could play a team within the state. And, the old school fans out there who remember the Big East days wouldn't mind seeing West Virginia again. Because honestly, going back to the 90s, early 2000s, Morgantown is always a crazy place to play. The West Virginia fans are bonkers. I can remember talking to Ken Dorsey back in the day, and he would say, that was the most difficult road environment, because the people who show up to those games are just absolutely nuts. So that would be an interesting old rivalry to revive. And then, you'd have an opportunity to make some new rivalries.
The money aspect of this, Dono, because I'm so glad you brought that up. That's the reason I think Florida State is gone within the year, because they are worth so much more than they're getting from the ACC. And the current grant of rights is not scaled to pay them more. They are stuck. They are stuck. So I know the big brands, the power brands, Miami included, are at least talking about options past the ACC. With the Big 12, where the money is, how much of that truly is a factor in this? Because to me, it all revolves around the dough. Is that what's going to push Miami in this conversation? And really, from a revenue standpoint from Miami, does the university make enough to make a case for the Big 10 or the SEC, or are they Big 12 bound by virtue of cash?
No, I see. There's a couple different ways to look at that.
I asked you 6 questions in one.
Yeah,
Good luck.
Good luck. Thank you for that. The conversation in Miami has changed over the last couple of years. There has been a concerted effort of donors coming together, because there's always, obviously there's been a lot of money in Miami, and even if people aren't necessarily alumni, Miami kind of was the community team, right? A small alumni based private institution, but it's a team that's been in a university that's been embraced by the city. So some of Miami's biggest donors are people with FIU diplomas, but they love Miami. But the money's been coming together in the last couple of years. Miami owns a hospital system, one of the most most prominent hospital systems in South Florida that has become a cash cow over the past 4 or 5 years. So the money has been coming in a way donated towards athletics over the last 2 or 3 years that it just wasn't before.
Yep.
And, there's been a kind of a change of attitude because Miami for many years did things on a shoestring budget, right? Oftentimes, if you're thinking about which head coach to hire, well, who's a cheaper option that maybe we can win with? They're paying Mario Cristobal a lot of money, okay? And they're paying his assistant coaches a lot of money, and they put a lot of resources and money into, private jet access for recruiting and that sort of stuff that they just didn't used to do. Now, one of the things that, I think they're obviously, I'm sure for, the SEC and the Big Ten, there are pros and cons to adding Miami. One thing that's a definite pro that I'm sure the Big 12 would be interested in, it's a top 12 television market in the country, which is uncommon, right? Because, a lot of the top SEC programs are in tiny regional TV markets. They rely on a lot of national television ratings and traffic, where you've got a very large built-in television market with Miami. I'm sure that's something that would be attractive and a pro for any of these conferences. So there's definitely an opportunity. I know that for the Big Ten, for example, they were very eager to go grab USC and UCLA because LA is like a top 3 or a top 5 market, whatever it is, and they wanted to lock that in place. That may be one of the reasons why South Florida could be attractive for them.
Donna, before we close up shop, I want to ask you to editorialize. Would you be happy with a move to the Big 12?
Oh, that's
yeah.
This might be the most negative that I got in a question that may not have intended that kind of response. I think if there's a scenario when the ACC is no longer relevant, I could talk myself into the Big 12 is a better alternative than going down with a sinking ship, right? Because how can you stay relevant with a bad TV split? And if Florida State and Clemson are gone, and North Carolina, maybe Duke, if they're all gone, then what are you still hanging around for? Okay. Yeah. I would definitely be disappointed if Miami didn't get the opportunity to land in the Big Ten or in the SEC. I mean, I would love to be in the SEC. Just the I know it's tough to win in that conference, but just the opportunity to play that sort of a schedule as someone who covers the team and broadcasts on games, I think that would be really enjoyable. So the Big 12 would not be the scenario that would make me happiest. But I could be satisfied with that because, again, so much of what Miami is trying to focus on right now is internal, right? Because it's been an athletic department that has really gotten in their own way for so long. For the better part of the last 20 years, they've gotten in their own way with mismanagement and not allocating enough funds to improve their facilities, which is something they're doing now, and improve the quality of the coaches that they hire. So, as long as you get into a spot where you get better TV revenue and an opportunity to make it to the college football playoffs when you have, double-digit wins, I think that's something that could make me somewhat happy and satisfied.
I love it. Which is already a lot better than Utah fans feel because they're trying to find a different conference that's not the Big 12 so they can avoid BYU. So already BYU fans love, or Big 12 fans love Miami fans just because of your very neutral response to that, Dono.
And honestly, that's what it is, because it's like, it wouldn't be something that would make me jump up and down, but also it's like, hey, it's not a bad ACC either.
Yeah. No, I mean, there is. And for us in the Big 12 to see the way the conference has grown past losing Texas and OU, and to know that the opportunity is there to be in a driver's seat if the ACC falls apart is a good spot to be in and can be rebuilt into a power conference that at least salvages money, which is what this is all about. So, Donna, where can folks find you? Locked On Big 12 listeners who like your stuff.
Oh, thank you so much. Yeah, well, you included both of my X accounts down below.
Because I know you operate them both so well, Don.
I do. Well, I mean, I try to anyway. You can follow my personal at Alex Dono. You can follow the show at Locked On Canes. I tend to keep most of my show-specific stuff on the Locked On Canes handle. And yeah, check out Locked On Canes. Every now and then we talk conference realignment, but this week we're talking mostly recruiting and transfer portal because it just never stops. There's always some good or bad. There's always something happening this week. So yeah, find the show wherever you get your podcasts.
For Alex Dono, I'm Drake Toll. Thanks for making our shows your first listen every single day. This has been a crossover of Locked On Canes and Locked On Thanks for making it your first listen every single day. Dose Grande. Washington State and Oregon State get their shocking court win. Now, what will they do with their millions and millions of dollars? They could bring themselves here. This is Locked On Big 12.
You are Locked On Big 12, your daily podcast on the Big 12 Conference, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Happy Monday, everybody. Welcome into Locked On Big 12. I'm Drake Toll from ESPN Central Texas, and that is the man who's known as Brian, but we call him Immaculate so the government can't track him down because he knows all of the expansion secrets. Thanks for making Locked On Big 12 your first listen every single day. Look, Immaculate, massive court win. I know you won't gloat, so I'm going to gloat for you. You said months ago on this show that it will take a court victory for Washington State and Oregon State to have the prowess to pull themselves back into the Power Five. That's exactly what occurred this weekend. Now, where do we sit?
Well, court win or settlement. They needed to get out of the lawsuit, in my opinion. I don't think anyone's going to want to talk to a school or schools that are currently engaged in a lawsuit against their current conference. That doesn't look good and sure is complicated. Where it stands now is, well, we're about to find out. I think there's a lot of rumors going around that there's talking between certain conferences. You know, what truth there is to that, I certainly do not know, but time is still ticking.
Where it sits right now, how much of this win, and this seems like the best case scenario of all the possibilities for these two schools. Now they have the assets of the Pac-12. They can control that. Is there enough money and power there to wield their way into a conference like the Big 12?
It's a good question. It's not as much as what we first thought. And when we were first talking, some things have come to light. Yeah. But the numbers being thrown around right now are still pretty substantial. And it seems like the schools who are departing are definitely counting on that money. And now that we have something like House versus NCAA that's reared its head,